The Case for Courtship. Why you are high on love potion and calling it a relationship. I teach anatomy. I'm also a combat medic with 23 years of service. And I have had some version of the same conversation over and over with young soldiers, mostly women, because the men in the room usually nodded and kept their mouths shut about relationships, about sex, about what they actually wanted out of a partner. And at some point in every single one of those conversations, somebody said it. I would not buy a car without test driving it first. Every single time. So let me address this directly, because I've had it. You are not buying a car that is a person sitting next to you. A person with a history, a family, a future, a set of fears you have not even discovered yet. And here is the part nobody who uses the car analogy ever thinks all the way through. If that is genuinely how you see a relationship as a vehicle evaluation, then when that car gets old, when the mileage climbs, when the new model rolls onto the lot looking shinier, you are going to trade it in without a second thought, completely consistent with your own stated values the entire time. Car metaphors produce car outcomes, full stop. Now, my female soldiers, and it was mostly the women asking the hard questions, which I respect far more than the men who just agreed with me to agree, eventually landed on the deeper issue. Not should I test drive, but why does this feel like the only rational option? And that is actually a great question. The answer is your brain. And your brain, bless its evolutionarily ancient little heart, is lying to you. Your brain is cooking your favorite meal every night. Let me ask you something. What is your absolute favorite food? Go ahead, pick it, picture it. Now imagine eating it every single night. Same dish, same recipe, unchanged. Night 1, extraordinary. Night 5, still great. Night 12, fine, I guess. Night 30, you are pushing it around the plate. Night 50, the smell of it makes you a little nauseous, and you find yourself irritated that it is your favorite. Because what kind of favorite food does this to you? Nothing changed about the food. What changed is your dopamine response to it. Dopamine is your brain's reward chemical. Anticipation, craving, the drive to repeat a behavior. It is the same pathway that fires during gambling, during drinking, during any pleasurable activity that can spiral into compulsion. And it is exactly what floods your brain during sex. The clinical term is hedonic adaptation. The plain English version, your nervous system gets used to it. The hit gets smaller, inevitably, unavoidably. And if the relationship was built on that hit in the first place, when it fades, the relationship feels like it is dying, right when it should be deepening. So when the passion feels like it is draining out of your relationship 6 months in, when you find yourself wondering if you picked the wrong person because something just feels different, stop. That is not the relationship dying. That is the dopamine normalizing. The question is, what is underneath it? You are not in love. You are high on love potion. Now add oxytocin to the picture, because this is where it gets genuinely alarming. Oxytocin is produced in the hypothalamus and released through skin-on-skin contact, any contact, a hug, holding hands, obviously sexual intimacy. It creates the sensation of deep attachment, warmth toward another person, the feeling of being bonded, the sense of wanting to stay, the bonding hormone, the cuddle hormone. Both names are accurate. Here is what nobody tells you. Oxytocin does not discriminate. It does not check the other person's character references before it fires. Good partner or absolute disaster, the chemistry is identical. You can find yourself genuinely, powerfully, deeply attached to someone who is completely wrong for you because your brain flooded itself with a bonding agent that has no quality control built into it. That feeling of, I cannot picture my life without this person at the 6-week mark, that is not love. That is oxytocin doing its job with zero information about whether the job should be done. Dopamine says, see them again. Oxytocin says, stay. Together, early in a relationship that has not been tested by anything real, they produce something that feels overwhelmingly like love and is neurochemically closer to a cocktail of very persuasive drugs that your body manufactured for free. You are not in love. You are high. And the culture has been telling you to make the most important decision of your life while you are high. What love actually is. Sexual attraction is a neurochemical event. It happens to you. The hypothalamus, the nucleus accumbens, the amygdala, these systems respond to physical cues before you have had a single conscious thought about the person. Fast, automatic, and completely indifferent to whether the person triggering it deserves your time. Emotional connection is built slowly over conversations at odd hours, watching how someone treats people they have no reason to impress, whether they show up when they would genuinely rather be somewhere else, whether they own it when they are wrong. It requires time because people are on their best behavior early. Character only reveals itself under pressure. And love, actual love, the kind that does not evaporate when the chemistry normalizes, is neither of those things. Love is a choice, not one choice. Not a feeling you fall into and ride. A decision made every single day, sometimes every hour. It is the choice to be present when your partner is furious and you are exhausted. The choice to sit with them when they are sick and there's nothing remotely romantic left in the room. The choice to give them what they need, not what they want, not what gets you off the hook fastest, but what they actually need. Even when those are entirely different things. Even when meeting the real need costs you something. That is love. You cannot test drive your way to it. You cannot build it on dopamine. You cannot shortcut to it with 6 weeks of oxytocin. You build it over time, through choice after choice after choice, in the moments when you would rather not. The soldier and the car revisited. One of my female soldiers, sharp, direct, not remotely intimidated by the conversation, hit me with a natural follow-up. Okay, but what if he is not good at it? I want you to notice what that question is actually asking. It is asking whether a person's value as a partner should be filtered primarily through sexual performance. And if the answer is yes, if that is the primary lens, then you do not have a relationship. You have a long-term hookup with talking in the gaps. The question itself reveals the foundation, and it is not the foundation you want to build a life on. Take it out of the equation entirely. In true courtship, you get to know the person through their behavior, not through what they look like unguarded, through what they do when they are tired, when they fail, when they are wrong, and have to decide what kind of person they are going to be about it. That is the information you actually need. You will have your entire lives together to figure out what the other person wants. In a real relationship, one built on actual trust and genuine emotional intimacy, you will be far more willing to have those conversations openly, without ego, without it becoming a referendum on whether the whole thing should continue. That is not a problem to solve before commitment. That is a conversation you have inside of one. And one more thing. If you practice abstinence during courtship and the other person leaves because of it, good, congratulations, you just dodged a bullet. A person who walks away because you will not sleep with them before you have decided they are worth building a life with has just shown you exactly what they were there for. That is not a loss. That is the system working correctly, equally yoked. And what that actually means, equally yoked. People hear that and immediately translate it to equal work, perfect symmetry, split everything 50-50, or it is not fair. That is not what it means. Real life will disabuse you of that interpretation fast anyway. Equally yoked means both people are pulling as hard as they can in the same direction, in the same harness. Your 100% and my 100% will look completely different on any given day. Some days your 100% is carrying everything. Some days mine is barely 20, and I need you to cover the rest. The yoke holds because we are both committed to giving everything we have, not because the load distributes perfectly, but because neither of us is putting it down and walking away. That kind of partnership requires compatibility of values, of direction, of what the relationship is fundamentally for. You cannot assess that in 6 weeks of dopamine and oxytocin. You assess it over time, through pressure, through disagreement, through watching who someone actually is when the stakes are real. Courtship gives you that window. Early sex closes it. What the test drive actually produces. The personality research on who wins in hookup culture is not ambiguous at this point. The men who thrive in short-term mating environments are, according to the clinical literature, disproportionately narcissistic, Machiavellian, psychopathic, and sadistic. The dark tetrad, researchers call it. Not because somebody labeled them that, because those 4 traits cluster together statistically and predict short-term mating success for a very specific reason. They look better early, more groomed, more extroverted, more willing to say exactly what you want to hear. The qualities that make someone a terrible long-term partner, the self-centeredness, the predatory read of every interaction, the complete inability to genuinely commit those qualities are invisible in the first few weeks, or they register as confidence, as excitement, as exactly the energy the dopamine-flooded brain responds to. You want a real-world example of what the dark tetrad actually looks like when it is operating at full power? Let me tell you about a man named Rodney Alcala. In September 1978, Alcala appeared on The Dating Game, the bachelor of its era as bachelor number 1. He was tall, handsome, charming, quick with a joke, near genius IQ. He had attended UCLA Film School, worked as a professional photographer for major outlets including the Los Angeles Times, and was by every surface metric the show was designed to measure exactly the kind of man a woman should want to go out with. The Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw, picked him. Then she went backstage and talked to him in person. Away from the lights, away from the scripted format, no cameras, no audience, just 2 people in a hallway. And something shifted. Her gut, not her oxytocin, not her dopamine, her gut, informed by direct, unhurried observation, told her something was deeply wrong. She described feeling ill, physically ill. She turned down the date and walked away. That decision almost certainly saved her life. Here is what Cheryl Bradshaw did not know when she was sitting behind that screen picking her bachelor. At the time Rodney Alcala walked onto that stage, he had already been convicted of R at ping an 8-year-old girl, beaten nearly to death with a steel bar. He had served just 34 months before being paroled. After his release, he was arrested again, this time found in possession of marijuana while with a 13-year-old girl, imprisoned again. Paroled again in 1977. Months before the Dating Game episode aired, he had R at PED, a 15-year-old hitchhiker who survived only by convincing him through sheer psychological courage that she was not a threat, buying herself just enough time to bolt when he stopped at a gas station. That case was still pending when he walked onto that television set. His method was consistent. He used his camera as a key. He would approach women at bars, on beaches, in parks, charming, confident, well-dressed, every bit the successful professional photographer. He would compliment them, ask if he could photograph them, suggest a proper shoot. And once he had them in an isolated location, the exit disappeared. The performance ended. The door was locked. Investigators believe his confirmed and suspected victim count stretches well past 100. Some detectives who worked the case for decades put the number closer to 150 or 200. He was convicted of 8 murders across California and New York. He died in prison in 2021 at 77, still on death row in California, having spent over 30 years cycling through appeals after 3 separate trials. His storage locker, discovered after his arrest, contained hundreds of photographs of women and girls in positions of vulnerability, many of them still unidentified to this day, along with a small silk pouch. Inside it, jewelry, trophies. One pair of rose gold earrings carried trace DNA belonging to a victim named Charlotte Lamb, a legal secretary murdered in Santa Monica in 1978. She had been killed right around the time he appeared on that television show, charming a studio audience. The trial itself was something out of a clinical textbook on narcissism. Alcala chose to represent himself. He cross-examined the families of his own victims from the witness stand, including Robin Samso's mother, who had watched her 2-year-old daughter's remains come back from a remote mountain ravine as bones scavenged beyond recognition by animals. He played an Arlo Guthrie song during his closing argument. He addressed the jury, arguing about the appellate process. Lead prosecutor Matt Murphy, who spent over a decade on the case and had to maintain a deliberately friendly working relationship with Alcala throughout the proceedings just to keep the trial moving, described the experience in terms that should make anyone's skin crawl. Alcala remained charming, engaged, quick, and utterly convinced that none of it applied to him. The same performance, right up until sentencing. Nobody on that Dating Game set saw any of it. No producer, no contestant, nobody in the audience. He was well-groomed, well-spoken, and radiated the exact kind of dominant confidence that the brain's threat and reward system registers as attractive. The lead detective who arrested him, Craig Robinson, described it plainly. His high IQ was not focused on developing real relationships. It was focused entirely on his next victim and how to exploit the people around him. What saved Cheryl Bradshaw was not chemistry. It was not 6 weeks of oxytocin bonding. It was a private, unscripted, pressure-tested conversation in a back hallway, the closest thing to actual courtship that situation allowed for, where the performance slipped just enough for her instincts to fire. Her intuition, operating on direct, unmedicated observation of the actual person in front of her, did what the dopamine-flooded brain cannot. The very thing that makes courtship feel slow and old-fashioned is the same thing that makes it protective. It forces time. And time is the one variable that predatory charm cannot survive indefinitely. Now, Rodney Alcala is an extreme case. Most dark tetrad men are not serial killers, but the personality cluster is real. It is documented in the clinical literature, and it predicts short-term mating success for precisely the reasons his case illustrates. They are more groomed, more extroverted, more confident on the surface, more willing to say and do whatever the moment requires. The slow burn, reliable, genuinely decent men, the ones who would show up for you and stay in the harness, are not disproportionately represented in short-term mating environments. The market selects against them. And the women who built relationships on early chemistry, on the test drive logic, on the foundation of a drug their own body produced, they tend to discover this later, around the time the dopamine normalizes, around the time the oxytocin bond is completely real, but the person they bonded to turns out not to be who the first 6 weeks suggested. None of that is their fault, but it is predictable and it is preventable. The case for courtship. Old-fashioned courtship was not a control mechanism. It was not suppression. It was intelligent sequencing, getting the information you actually need before the neurochemical cocktail makes the decision for you. Get to know the person first, as a full human being, under ordinary conditions and under pressure. Before dopamine tells you they are irreplaceable and oxytocin bonds you to them so deeply that leaving feels like surgery, build the emotional foundation first. Let the slower, more durable bonding system do its work. Then, when you have decided through actual evidence and observation that this is the person you want, the physical dimension becomes what it was always meant to be. Not the foundation, the expression of something that already exists. Not the beginning of the bond, the deepening of one that has been tested. Our brains and our significantly longer lifespans compared to our evolutionary ancestors were not built for serial short-term mating. The neurological architecture for lifelong pair bonding is real. The deep, sustained oxytocin of a long-term committed relationship built over years through choice, through difficulty, through showing up when you did not feel like it is more durable and more sustaining than any early spike. The system is built for the long game. Love is a discipline, a daily choice. To be there when it is inconvenient, to give what is needed, to stay in the harness, to see the best version of the person in front of you and choose every single morning to work toward it. The culture sold a generation on test drives, on auditions and trial runs and making sure everything checks out before you commit to a single thing. A generation of loneliness, regret, and broken attachment later, maybe it is time to consider the test drive was the problem. Courtship was not a cage. It was a blueprint. But what do I know? I'm only a science teacher and Army combat medic who literally wrote the textbook on human anatomy and has spent decades watching people build relationships on neurochemistry, then express genuine shock when the chemistry changes.